Hi everyone, welcome back to JAMA Network Open Live. I'm Angel Desai, the JAMA Fishbind Fellow. As always, if you're following along, please feel free to comment on Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook, I believe. Today we're going to be talking about trends in racial ethnic representation among U.S. medical students. You may recall that Seth and I did talk about this article a few weeks ago, but unfortunately at the time we had some technical difficulties. But two of the authors have graciously agreed to come back today for a special edition to be able to discuss it in a little bit more detail. So we're going to be speaking with Linaire Lett and Dr. Jaya Isola. Thank you to both of you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Just to start off with, can you just tell us a little bit about yourselves and about the study?
Okay, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm an MD PhD student at University of Pennsylvania.
And I'm the Assistant Dean for Inclusion and Diversity here at Penn, as well as the Executive Director for the Center for Health Equity Advancement. And I'm an internist and a pediatrician by training.
And I guess just like a brief bit about the study, the goal of it was to essentially design and implement a metric for measuring representation of underrepresented minorities over time in the medical student workforce.
Perfect. It was a really, really interesting study and a great read and very timely. And I actually just wanted to start off by asking what made you interested in this topic and how did you kind of come about to deciding to look at this issue in more depth?
Well, I think for me, primarily was in response to a lot of the recent publications that had come out, sort of assessing diversity. Many of them had been reporting modest increases in response to changes in accreditation policies. And I think while that work was great, it was not referencing the dynamic changes of the underlying population, because the reality is that a lot of those changes might not be due to structural differences in how medical schools recruit people, but might actually be due to the changes in the population that is applying and the fact that we just have more Blacks and have more Hispanics who are in the country able to apply. And so I wanted to give some rigor behind those metrics so we could really be able to accurately chart where we've been and where we're going.
Perfect. And can you just tell us a little bit about some of the main findings of this study?
You take that one, so.
Thank you. So the main findings were that representation for the A's, MC's, defined underrepresented minorities has been pretty stagnant over the last 15 years. We looked at the window between 2002 and 2017, and we used this metric called the representation quotient, which is just a ratio of the representation of a group in the medical student workforce and then in the country. And so basically that allowed us to track how represented a group is relative to them in the country overall. And we found that for Blacks, Black women, they're still about 40% underrepresented compared to the country, and that's pretty much the same as they were at the beginning of the window. Hispanics have the greatest degree of underrepresentation, with a 70% underrepresentation relative to their age-adjusted population over that same window, and then Black men around the same at 60% underrepresentation. So those are the primary findings for URMs.
And you mentioned the representation quotient, which I found really interesting. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about, first of all, sort of how did you derive that or where that came from? And then also refer to, there's a couple of figures here, figure 1A and figure 2A, which looked at the representation quotient by race and ethnicity and sex for medical school applicants. And then similarly, representation quotient by race and ethnicity and sex for medical school matriculants. If you could just walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah.
Sure. No, go ahead and do the data, and I'll talk more about the implications.
So we have the paper right here. So as far as where we came from for the metric, a lot of ratios are used in statistics generally. It's a general way of comparing two proportions. And so we wanted to just adapt that to this novel setting. And so it's a very simple metric that comes from odds ratios or other ratios that you see commonly in the medical literature.
And just to add to that, I mean, the main purpose is, can we get our metric to sort of represent our intent. If our goal for medicine is sort of to mirror the population that we're serving, can we get our measurement of diversity in the workforce to reflect that intent? So, is our workforce reflective of the population or proportional? Is our increases proportional to the increases in the general census? And so that's in essence what the representative quotient allows us to do. Sorry. And I think we've applied it in a couple places. I think the figures we'll kind of walk through, but we've also applied it at the state level. So you can do the same thing, where you can look at representation within a state and see, does that population that we're serving, the med schools within that state, are they generating physicians reflective of the population within that state? You could probably do it within an institution as well. So I think the representation quotient, can be sort of applied at multiple levels.
And that's great. Actually, I wanted to, that was a perfect segue to figure 3, which was the chloropleth, right? Am I saying that right? Map, which looked really at, looked at this information and the representation quotient by state, which I love. I thought it was really interesting, and you can really see the breakdown here pretty well. Was there anything sort of both by state but also in general that surprised you while you were doing the study or while you were sort of putting this information together?
Yeah, I want to give credit to my colleague Moses Murdoch, who actually did most of the mapping work. But the thing that stuck out to me is that if you look at those figures, places where underrepresentation is greatest are the places where populations are more diverse. And so where we're succeeding in representing largely homogeneous non-URM populations in states like Connecticut and Vermont, where there aren't a lot of minorities. We have great representation. But in states like California, where there's a huge diversity, we're trending behind. And so what that tells me is that you have to really focus on those really diverse places, especially in the South, to identify places where we have a lot of room to grow. And I think these maps just beautifully represent that.
Definitely. And looks like we have 2 people that just joined us, Penn Med News and Erica Ramrez7. Hi, welcome, and thank you. And so I wanted to go back to the point about, you mentioned that these maps were there were some things that surprised you, but I'm also wondering just sort of overall, was there anything that you were expecting to find that you didn't find, or potentially vice versa, that was sort of interest? Because I think the topic in general is very interesting, very timely, and important, I think, just thinking about diversity overall in medical education.
I was not surprised.
Neither was I.
By the findings. I think, we were surprised by other, citations and other references that sort of said that we were making some progress. Because I think when you're sort of working in these spaces, you feel the reality that there's still a lot of opportunity for growth and improvement. And so I think applying a metric such as this allows us to really more critically evaluate whether we're successful or not, and whether our efforts are making a difference.
Yeah, for me, as a Black medical student, there's a lot of weight and importance to me, because I think representation is important for us to give good healthcare for everyone. And so I found myself frustrated with some of the other works that were kind of alluding to fixing a problem that I knew intrinsically, that I lived, that I saw was still a big problem. And so I want to put some rigor behind, and that's why I'm not shocked at these findings or shocked at the severity of some of these groups. So it wasn't shock, it was something that I felt just needed to be done.
Absolutely, and we're so glad that you did. Again, I thought this was a really, really interesting topic and really important. Did you have anything else that you wanted to mention about the study before we end today?
I think for us, we think this is a first step on a dialogue towards actually making progress. I think defining our metrics more accurately to measure our successes is just a first step in a long journey towards, okay, now what are the sort of myriad of contributors, and how do we sort of figure out and strategize not just on sort of the applicant perspective, but on the system perspective, how do we make our processes for selection of incredible diverse candidates more equitable, more like bias free, in order to sort of inch forward towards, achieving our ideal state?
Yeah, I think the goal for me is to see this metric applied at an institutional and a regional level so we can see people who are actually, because there's some heterogeneity, there's some places that are likely succeeding. So if we can take their model, adopt it, and scale it to get success across the board, that'd be ideal for me. So this is meant to be a way to systematize how we do this and empower our system to be better.
I think that's a perfect way to end. Thank you to both of you again for coming today and speaking with us about this topic and this paper. And thanks to all of our viewers for checking in with us today. I hope everybody has a great day and a great weekend.
Thank you.
Great,
Also.
thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.